You're listening to Historical Perspectives with Mr. Malt. Learn about life by looking at our history. Teachers, for more information about historical perspectives, search Mr. Malt's Marketplace on Teachers Pay Teachers or at mrmaltmarketplace.com. Happy learning!
Newsies. Have you ever wondered how people got their news before the internet or TV? A long time ago, newspapers were the main way people learned about what was happening in the world. To sell these papers, kids called Newsies stood on the streets and shouted the day's biggest stories to grab people's attention. Newsies worked hard, often in tough conditions, and became important figures in American history. What was a Newsies day like? Newsies were kids, some as young as 9 or 10 years old, who sold newspapers in cities across the United States during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Most of them were boys, but there were some girls too. Many Newsies were poor and had to work to help their families earn money. For some, selling newspapers was the only way they could survive. A typical day started very early in the morning. Newsies would go to the newspaper office to buy a stack of newspapers. They didn't work for the newspapers. They were independent workers, which means they had to pay for the papers up front. If they didn't sell enough papers, they lost money. This made their job very risky. Once they had their papers, the Newsies spread out across town, looking for busy places where lots of people would pass by. Train stations, parks, and crowded streets were popular spots. They shouted headlines like, "Extra, extra, read all about it," to get people to buy a paper. If it was raining or very cold, the job was even harder. They didn't have fancy raincoats or winter clothes. They just kept working. The challenges Newsies faced. Being a Newsie wasn't easy. They worked long hours and had to deal with tough customers, strict police officers, and competition from other Newsies. Some kids even slept on the streets because they didn't have homes to go to after work. Things got even harder in 1899 during something called the Newsboys Strike. Some big newspaper companies raised the prices that the Newsies had to pay for their stacks of newspapers. This made it nearly impossible for the kids to make a profit. The Newsies decided to fight back. They organized a strike, which is when workers stop doing their jobs to demand change. The Newsies refused to sell papers for 2 weeks and got lots of attention. Finally, the companies agreed to listen to them and made it easier for the Newsies to earn money again. Why are Newsies important? The Newsies played a big role in the history of workers' rights, helping show that even kids could stand up for themselves. They also show us what life was like for poor children in those times. Many of these kids were incredibly tough and creative. They didn't give up, even when things were hard. Today, the Newsies are remembered in books, movies, and even a Broadway musical. They remind us of a time when newspapers ruled the world, and hardworking kids shouted the headlines on busy city streets.
Thanks for listening to this Historical Perspective. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe. Also, search for Historical Perspectives on Teachers Pay Teachers to learn more about other topics, such as the Golden Gate Bridge, Henry Ford, schools in the early 1900s, and so much more. Happy learning!